Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally stepping right back into the blood and dust of 1857. We're going to look at the tragic yet somehow culturally triumphant life of Bahadur Shah Zafar II, and we're going to do it right through the eyes of the very rebels who crowned him.
Okay, I want you to put yourselves directly in our boots for a second. We're Indian rebel soldiers in 1857. We've just sparked this massive, desperate mutiny against British rule. But to actually succeed, we desperately need a leader. We need a figurehead to legitimize our uprising. And so we're marching straight to the Red Fort in Delhi to find one.
Now you have to understand, this tension, it had been boiling in our ranks for decades. The East India Company was basically suffocating us with these brutal, exploitative policies, and all of this culminated in 1856. They introduced these new rifle cartridges greased with animal fat, which was a profound insult to both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. That was it. That was the final spark. On May 10, 1857, our mutiny absolutely erupted in Meerut, and that led us straight to Delhi's gates.
So here's the wild part. We arrive at the Red Fort, totally pumped up, ready to crown this fierce military mastermind to lead our war, right? Well, the man we found wasn't a warrior at all. No way. Instead, we ended up placing the entire fate of our rebellion in the hands of an 82-year-old melancholic poet who literally spent his days philosophizing about death. Talk about a plot twist.
Section 1. A Poet on the Throne. To really understand our shock, you've got to look at the empire Abu Zafar Mirza Bahadur Shah was actually born into back in 1775 and compare it to what he inherited. By the time he ascended the throne at age 62 in 1837, the sun had well and truly set on his family's legacy. His ancestors, they controlled these vast, incredibly wealthy territories. But Zafar's reign was basically restricted to Delhi alone. He lived off a pitiful company pension and acted purely as a figurehead. Honestly, he was a king in name only.
But here's the thing, because he was politically powerless, he completely turned to the arts. While we soldiers were out there bleeding and scheming, he embraced his identity as Zafar. That was his pen name. And under this name, he composed these profoundly human Persian and Urdu verses. He actually transformed the Red Fort into this vibrant cultural oasis where literature and art just flourished, completely insulated from our fading political power. Just listen to these words he wrote. "How small is this world? How limited our time within it." Wow. This profound resignation really reflects an emperor who fully grasped the meaninglessness of worldly power. It's beautiful, but it's such a somber realization, and it completely set the tone for his reign way before we ever showed up at his gates.
Section 2. The Reluctant Symbol.
82. Yep, when we arrived at his doorstep demanding he lead us, Zafar was 82 years old. And man, was he reluctant to join our uprising. I mean, he wasn't a strategist, and he knew perfectly well the terrifying might of the British forces we had just challenged.
So we basically forced the crown back onto his head. We needed a unifying figurehead to give our cause legitimacy, forcing Zafar to step up as the leader of a united Hindu-Muslim front. And astonishingly, it actually worked for a minute. We rallied so fiercely under that old Mughal banner, and a brief, shining mirage of victory against British rule actually emerged across northern India. It was incredible while it lasted.
Section 3. The Fall of Delhi.
Sadly, that shining moment of rebellion was literally nothing more than a mirage. The British systematically stripped his entire world away with just brutal efficiency. By September 1857, they retook Delhi with devastating force. Thousands of our brothers died. Zafar fled, but he was betrayed and captured. And then, the ultimate heartbreak. The British executed his sons right in front of his eyes. Treating him as the mastermind behind our rebellion, they sentenced him for treason and banished him forever.
Section 4. Exile in Rangoon. Think about this for a second. For the man who had turned the Red Fort into a cultural haven, his punishment was the absolute erasure of his environment. In 1858, our octogenarian former emperor was sent thousands of miles away to Rangoon, Burma, and placed under strict guard. And perhaps the absolute cruelest punishment for a poet, he was forbidden from officially writing or creating art. Stripped of his pen, his city, and his freedom, he spent his final years mourning his lost home entirely in his head, literally forced to compose verses he could never write down.
Yet, against all odds, his tragic verses actually survived through the oral tradition of the people who loved him. He wrote, "Kitna baki hai baki naame nishan iska, ek pagah hai bas baki reh gayi baki sab viran," which translates to, "How much is left of his memory now? Only the tomb remains, the rest is all desolate." These words served as a heartbreaking prophecy of his own fate. He had written all about the transience of life, and then he lived it, dying broken, exiled, and seemingly forgotten in 1862.
Section 5. The Power of Defeat.
But you know what? History had a totally different plan for our last emperor. On one side, his physical reality was absolute defeat. Our rebellion crumbled, his throne was lost, and the age of the Mughals officially ended. But on the other side, there's his profound cultural legacy. Decades later, those exact same melancholic verses became literal anthems for a brand new generation of Indian freedom fighters taking on British rule. Our reluctant warlord had somehow become this lasting symbol of dignity and resistance.
And this really brings us to a profound lesson in leadership. Zafar proves that a leader's true measure isn't always about how they rule in triumph, but rather how they endure in defeat. True power isn't always found in military might or vast territories. Sometimes it's deeply, deeply embedded in the culture, the dignity, and the words we leave behind when absolutely everything else is stripped away.
As we look at Zafar's immortal words today, well over a century after his death, they honestly ring truer than ever. Yet, in that small time and in that small world, we can create something immortal. So we have to ask ourselves, in our small time, despite the defeats we might inevitably face, what enduring legacy are we creating?